Now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's
Okay.
visible, sir. We can see, sir.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
sir.
we can.
Yeah, yes, sir. Shall we start, sir?
Yes, I am
Yeah,
ready.
yeah. With your permission, sir. Good morning, all the audience, research students, and all my colleagues. So today, this is the second day of our last debate on the biotechnology for crop improvements, organized by the Raj Foundation, College of Agriculture Biotechnology, Vadadgaon. So now we have speaker, our eminent speaker, Dr. B. Fakhruddin sir. He is a professor and he head Department of Biotechnology and Crop. Today he will deliver his presentation on basic understanding of micropropagation. So, sir, please start your presentation. Yeah.
Okay, you
Good
can
morning,
see
sir, and
slides, right?
welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Good
can see.
Okay. Namaste, good morning to everyone. This is second day. Again, today, like yesterday, I have planned in a very basic way, largely looking at the students maybe. Then let's start. Basic aspects of tissue culture and micropropagation. I give some examples of horticulture crops maybe. Let's look at what is plant tissue culture. Plant tissue culture is the technique of growing plant cells, cells, tissues, organs, even seeds and any other parts on a sterile environment and in the nutrient media. There are two critical things here. One is sterile environment. It must be a sterile condition and it must have a nutrition media, a nutrient media there. So that becomes an in vitro. Therefore, it becomes in vitro. Sterile environment and nutrient media on which you grow cells, tissues, organs, seeds, even plants, any part of the plant or whatever it is. All of that constitute to form plant cell tissue culture. Okay. Now, for this to happen, fundamentally there is one principle. There's a phenomena rather. It's called totipotency, as all of us know, wherein like an adult plant cell cells are capable of reproducing completely into a whole plant, single cell to whole plant. So means they have ability to give rise fully differentiated plant from a single cell. So just you see here, if you take the carrot roots and a few cells from the carrot root, and then they will eventually grow, they become like culture, and then eventually you get a whole plant, in fact, entire plant you get. So this way, from a single cell, you get the completely fully differentiated plant, and that's like the totipotency, the phenomena of totipotency. This is fundamentally responsible for a plant to respond in vitro. Now, plant tissue culture, basically, it's the maintenance of cells and organs on the plant, right? But when you are trying to do that, the culturing, when you are culturing like seed, organ, tissue, cell, protoplast, or any other part in the sterile condition, two things that that generally happen outside also happen in vitro. What is that? One is growth and development of whatever the part that we are using will happen under the sterile conditions. So that means growth and development of cell, organ, tissue, or anything that we culture on the nutrient media will happen. So growth and development is what? Like development of a plant into a complete plant, right? A cell into a complete plant. So why do we do this? This in vitro culturing of any of these organs or cells is generally done for genetic transformation, like mostly in our laboratories, academic laboratories, research laboratories, we do it for genetic transformation, or many a times for plant breeding objectives, for plant breeding applications, crop improvement applications. An industrial perspective, secondary metabolite protection, also industrial perspective, micropropagation of sexual and asexual, sexually propagated plants, even to eliminate pathogens from the stock that we have. For all these purposes, many more purposes, we do this tissue culture, right? Now, there are three important factors that govern plant tissue culture. What is that? One is growth media, as we saw already in the definition, growth media. In growth media, we have to have minerals, growth factors, carbon source, hormone, all these essentials must be there in the growth media. There are a number of growth media that have been formulated from time to time. Maybe specific for specific groups of plant or a specific purpose. These growth media essentially have all minerals that are required for a plant to grow, also growth factors that are required, carbon source of course, and then hormones in varying proportions, and specific for tissue or a genotype or groups of plants that are being used. Then the second important factor is environmental factors such as light, temperature, photoperiod, aseptic conditions. We need to provide them. We need to optimize them, and then we need to provide them in the quality that is really required for tissue culture to happen. Then the third and very important factor is explant source. This explant source, usually the younger the better, less differentiated is better. So tissues that are generally which are cultured already are better. Like in vitro cultured tissues can be taken as well. So in this case, different species show different differences in their ability or their amenability for the tissue culture. As you know, not that all species respond equally. There are some species that respond very well. There are some species which are really hard to respond in vitro. So therefore, there is a lot of difference among species for in vitro for their ability to get cultured in vitro. In many cases, as we all know, even genotypes, different varieties within a species, they vary for their response to in vitro culture. Many a times we need to optimize for the variety that you are interested in multiplying in vitro or using it for transformation. Not that just you can pick, but you need to optimize it. So, but also much recently, genotype independent protocols or genotype independent combination of growth regulators and nutrient media are coming up much recently. Like for example, in rice, we have a genotype independent regeneration method or a protocol where you can get the plants irrespective of genotype or variety. So these three factors are very important when we are doing tissue culture. Now, another important aspect of tissue culture is two hormones, basically two groups of hormones. One is auxin, another is cytokinin. Auxins, as all of us know, they stimulate root development. Cytokinin stimulate shoot development. Now, the relative proportion of these hormones in the media determine what you get from the explant, whether you get root development or shoot development or callus development. Generally, if you have a higher auxin and lower cytokinin, the cells and the media will tend towards root development. And if it is like higher cytokinin, lower auxin, then shoot development will happen, like cytokinins are higher, so shoot development will happen. If you have almost equal proportion of any of the auxins or any of the cytokinins that you choose, then generally it leads to callus development. So you can have callus made on the media from the cell that you take, and then eventually make it to develop, allow it to develop a root, also allow it to develop a shoot, or allow it to develop a shoot and then let the shoot to make root by manipulating these hormones based on this principle. So this is very centric to tissue culture and very specific to species, and many a times specific to genotype. We need to play around these these hormones, kind and quantity. There are three fundamental abilities of plants. What is that? One is totipotency, another is differentiation, the third one is competence. Totipotency, we saw it already. So totipotency is an inherent capability of a plant cell. In fact, if you suitably stimulate it, it develops into a complete plant. Another important ability of a plant cell is differentiation, dedifferentiation. This is capacity of a matured cell in the sense like it is already a part of an organ. Such a cell will return back to meristematic condition. This is a wonderful phenomena. It de-differentiates back into meristematic condition from where it had in fact differentiated. Now it has capacity to come back. And then once it becomes meristematic condition, then it develops into a new growing point and eventually redifferentiates and then becomes a new organ. This is de-differentiation. So differentiation, de-differentiation is a possibility, is the fundamental ability of plant cells, but only thing is we need to give those conditions in terms of hormone and media in vitro. Then another important thing is potency. Potency is the endogenous potential of given cell or tissue to develop in a particular pathway. You want it in a, you want that particular cell to go in one particular pathway. You can in fact make it to go in that particular pathway, provided you give those conditions to the cell. Then why plant tissue culture is important? Plant tissue culture is important. It has value in studies such as cell biology, genetics, biochemistry, and many other research areas. In fact, if you recall, especially during 50s and 60s, tissue culture was considered as centric to molecular biology or biotechnology. So without tissue culture, we cannot do biotechnology, or we cannot understand cell biology. That was the kind of notion that was there. So it was like that. But later the systems developed, like crop models and plant models took over, and then they took over the tissue culture, in fact. But nonetheless, tissue culture is very important for cell biology, genetics, biochemistry, and many other research areas, especially when you are trying to do transformation. You want to test the gene that you clone, promoter that you clone. Eventually, you end up in touching upon the tissue culture phase of your research. Then tissue culture is also very important in crop improvement. You know, there are many applications of tissue culture in crop improvement, apart from the multiplication part of it. But for a breeder, for a scientist involved in crop improvement, tissue culture is quite handy in multiple situations. Seed production, seed propagation is another thing which is like well accepted and well exploited part of the tissue culture. Another very important part of application of tissue culture is conservation of genetic material. So long-term conservation of genetic material is achieved using tissue culture. Then the types of in vitro culture, if you start looking, we have basically like culture of intact plants, cell and seedlings, like intact full plant. It could be seed and seedling. Then you have embryo culture, like immature embryo. Then organ culture, callus culture, cell suspension culture, protoplast culture. These are all different types of in vitro cultures that are possible, that generally done in the tissue culture. So let's look at each one of them maybe a little closely. If you try to look at them a little closely, like seed culture, why would one do seed culture? Seed culture is basically growing seed aseptically in the in vitro on the artificial media. It's already pre-formed seed. We are culturing it on the media for reasons, for the requirement, for our requirement. So basically, in situations, it increases the efficiency of germination of the seeds, where germination is the problem. You can achieve germination of such seeds on the media. Then precocious germination by application of plant growth hormones is something that you can achieve, or is the reason why you do this. Then production of clean seedlings of explants or meristem culture for further requirement is another reason why you do seed culture. Sometimes very rare, but sometimes you do in vitro screening kind of endeavor using seed culture. Now, the other type of in vitro culture is embryo culture, very important type of culture that crop improvement people do. Growing embryo aseptically in the in vitro condition is embryo culture. You basically take out the embryo, you excise it, okay, aseptically, then put it on the media, and then the embryo will grow and you get the whole plant, just in the way you see it in this picture. Maybe you take out, you excise the under sterile conditions, take out the embryo. See, the embryo is here, it's a small one, and then you put it onto the media. Eventually it grows, and then you get the seedling and you can take it to feed. So that is embryo culture. So why do we do? What are the uses of this embryo culture? One is to rescue the embryos, like embryo rescue from the wild crosses that a breeder or a scientist involved in crop improvement performs. generally the embryo may not develop and it gets aborted. Therefore, after crossing, you excise the embryo in the very initial stages and put it under the artificial media in vitro to get the whole plant. Then production of plants from the embryo, that is basically haploid production, one would do this embryo culture. Then the overcoming embryo abortion due to incompatibility issues. Incompatibility, incompatibility, self-incompatibility, and then cross incompatibility. But you need compatibility of some specific crosses. Under those circumstances, you can, but you also know that incompatibility can be at any level. Crossing those barriers, we can achieve fertilization and then rescue such a embryo in vitro using this type of approach. Then overcoming seed dormancy and self-sterility of seeds is another application of embryo culture. Then when you do this, usually you end up in shortening the breeding cycle. That is, seed to seed duration can be shortened. So that's going to be very important for a breeder. Then another in vitro culture is organ culture. Any plant organ can serve as an explant to initiate the culture, such as shoot, root, leaf, flower. And each one of these in vitro cultures, like shoot in vitro culture, root in vitro culture, leaf, flower in vitro culture, is done for the specific purpose. Like when you take shoot, you take maybe shoot tip, root, maybe root culture, just take part of the root. Then leaf, it's called leaf culture. If it is flower, generally anther or ovules are taken, and then in vitro culturing is done. Now let's look at what is this shoot apical meristem culture. The shoot apical meristem culture, basically shoot. If you look at this shoot, you can see here the growing shoot. I hope you can see. And this shoot, in fact, is a complex thing that is happening over there. And now culturing that shoot is done. Now the shoot apical meristem, basically, there are some transcription factors that are involved in this. This is one of the well understood cultures, one well understood phenomena in plant biology. Like there are 5 transcription factors or 5 different types of transcription factors that have been implicated into the shoot apical meristem culture or SAM. One is knotted, or KN1 is being studied well in maize. Then another is Arabidopsis shoot meristemless called STM. And third one is Pushell or WUS. Then you have Clavata 1, 2, 3, Clavata, and then CUC1, CUC3. Both of them are from Arabidopsis. These 5 groups of transcription factors, and then the members of these groups of transcription factors have been well studied in the context of SAM. If you have a close look at SAM, because this is important for micropropagation as well, understanding this is important. It has a central zone, like it has a central zone. Then it has a rib zone that is below, exactly opposite to central zone. You have the rib zone. Then you have peripheral zones. On the either side, you have the peripheral zones. And then next to that, what you see are leaf primordia. These are all leaf primordia, right? So these leaf primordia have to initiate. And then the rib zone, central zone, and then peripheral zone. Actually, we have layers here. There are 3 layers, L1, L2, L3. These transcription factors and members of these transcription factors, they regulate these peripheral zone, central zone, and rib zone formation. And since these are transcription factors and they have their own sets of genes that are upregulated or governed as and when the expression of these transcription factors happen. If you have a little closer look of involvement of these transcription factors in the SAM, shoot apical meristem, you can see L1, L2, L3, right? This is shoot L1, L2, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. That basically falls in the central zone, And then you have L1 is all of them, and L3 is in the RZ, rib zone, right? And then you have peripheral zones. Now in the central zone, you have these clavata CLV3, CLV1 and 2, and then WUS, coordinatedly expressing in those 3 layers, right? That keeps those cells dividing, continuously dividing over there. And then you have other transcription factors such as auxin related transcription factors. You have auxin related transcription factors, including PINS and BUD. These transcription factors are much down. Above that, you have ARR, a group of ARR, I mean the family of ARR transcription factors that is expressing. This more auxin branching are called MAX transcription factors. You see there is a MAX, actually a family of them, MAX1, MAX3, MAX4 transcription factors have been implicated. This MAX dependent signal called MDS is another transcription factor which interact among themselves, and then they express and then they regulate. They have the feedback onto the PINS, expression of PINS as well. Coordinatedly, all these transcription factors control the auxin levels and then auxin mobility over there. Then you also can see cytokinin related transcription factors, CK. And in a, if you carefully see here, this is how PINS are directly involved in PINS, CUC, STM are involved in up and down regulating cytokinin levels in this area. When cytokinins and auxins are up and down regulated, or their concentrations are built up in a manner that is really good enough for the shoot to continue or shoot to grow. Also, shoot bud to initiate. What you see in bold colors is in blue is a new bud initiation over there. P1, P2, P3 are the primordia, leaf primordia, right? In the leaf primordia, you see blue colors where a new bud is initiated, new apical bud is initiated. So that's how new buds will form depending on the coordinated expression of these transcription factors over there, right? So in fact, quite a bit of data, especially in situ hybridizations of these transcription factors in SAM development, very clearly showing. For example, you can see here, I have one slide here taken. See what you see, the dotted block dots here is the expression of NOTED1. And you see the expression of NOTED1 only in shoot apical meristem, but not in the P1, P2. What is P1, P2? They are the leaf primordia. It is not expressing in the leaf primordia. It is expressing only in the shoot apical meristem, right? So that's the involvement of NOT. Like that, there's a lot of data available, in fact, for each one of these transcription factors and very well understood. So involvement of these transcription factors in shoot apical meristem to continue, like cytokinin receptors, cell cycle related, shoot meristem development related, they are modulated. And then the genes serve as the potential, in fact, all these genes, all these transcription factors serve as the potential markers to understand in vitro shoot organogenesis at molecular level. You can initiate, you can allow, or you can achieve the in vitro shoot formation, and then take these transcription factors and do in situ for their expression. Then there are also other transcription factors from Arabidopsis like ESR1, and its overexpression appeared to induce adventitious shoot formation, which is like one can think of engineering it for the adventitious shoot formation, and from the root explants. Even in the absence of exogenous addition of plant hormones, the adventitious shoots will form. That is because this ESR1 will mobilize and regulate the requirement of hormones inside. Now, what for this apical, in practical sense, shoot apical meristem cultures are generally used for the production of virus-free germplasm, mass production of desired genotype, then facilitation of exchange of material between locations, because it's a clean culture, they don't have any diseases inside, including viruses, and therefore their movement to and fro is not generally restricted. Then cryopreservation, like in vitro conservation, is another possibility using these shoot apical meristem culture. Then another type of in vitro culture is root culture, root organ culture. Root organ culture is like generally done for the, of course, many times even for the transformation to test the expression of promoters, root specific promoters, and so on we use. Apart from that, an industrial viewpoint of view, production of secondary metabolites, these root cultures are used. Studying the physiology and metabolism of roots, primary root determinants of growth pattern, and so on and so forth. These root organ cultures are used. And another type of in vitro culture is ovary or ovule culture. Ovary or ovule culture is generally done for the production of haploid plants, a common explant for the initiation of the somatic embryo culture as well. In vitro fertilization for production of distant hybrids, avoiding style and stigma incompatibilities. Also, this ovule culture is used. And another thing is overcoming abortion of embryo due to incompatibility or barriers when you do wide crosses. Also, this ovule culture is done. You can see here a plant forming in vitro and maturing tomato. Similarly over here also, right? Yeah. Then the another type of in vitro culture is Anther-mycospore culture. This is like quite important from practical point of view. This anther culture is done for the haploid production, haploid plants, production of haploid plants. Basically, you take anthers and then the haploid tissue inside will induce the will produce the callus. You have to selectively make it to produce the callus, and then production of homozygous diploid lines eventually is achieved, and they become the inbred lines in the crop breeding. Then overcome the mutations or recessive phenotypes. I mean, these haploids have their own applications even in functional genomics. Even if you want to study more about gametospore and then its functional genomics, this is a wonderful tool for the molecular biologists also. Then another type of culture, in vitro culture, is callus culture. Callus culture is callus basically is an unorganized mass of cells, right? And a tissue that develops in response to injury, generally in a physical or chemical means when you do it. And most cells of which are differentiated actually. In a callus, most of the cells are differentiated, but they're all highly unorganized within that tissue. They're all completely unorganized. And the same callus, if you grow it in the suspension, that becomes suspension culture. When callus pieces are agitated in a liquid medium, they tend to break up and become independent cells. But only thing is we need to continuously agitate them. These suspensions are much easier to bulk up than callus, right? And then the multiplication and application. This particular thing has, in fact, callus cultures have a lot of applications in the in vitro tissue culture, basic biology, pharma, and many other applications are there for these suspension cultures. Another type of culture we have is in vitro culture. We have is protoplast culture. Living material of plant or bacterial cells, including protoplasm, plasma membrane, often cell wall. After the cell wall is removed, is nothing but a protoplast. This protoplast has specific utilities, especially for the transformation. And apart from that, protoplast can be used in the somatic hybridization process, where we can combine two different genomes. Okay, this is another way of creating even polyploids, alloploids specifically. Then it's also possible for the partial genome transfers using protoplast hybridization. There are many examples of that nature. Then genetic engineering, especially for the microinjection, this particular method is important. Also for the electroporation, of course, you also can use agrobacterium. So somatic hybridization and protoplast cultures are quite important in that way. Organ transfer or transfer of organelles it's something which is unique to protoplast if one tries to do it in the plants. Then the next aspect would be plant regeneration pathways. Plant regeneration, in vitro regeneration pathways would be basically organogenesis is one thing. The other one is somatic embryogenesis. Organogenesis relies on production of organs either directly from the explant or from the callus structure. While in somatic embryogenesis, embryo-like structures which can develop into whole plant in a way that it is similar to zygotic embryo are formed from the somatic cells. That is somatic embryogenesis. So apart from organogenesis and somatic embryogenesis, yet another way is like existing meristem that could develop into whole plant. So maybe these are the three ways. One is organogenesis, somatic embryogenesis. The third one is existing meristem developing into whole plant, are the three plant regeneration pathways that one can visualize. Look at each one of them. Organogenesis, basically this organogenesis. Organogenesis is the ability of non-meristematic plant tissue to form various organs de novo. It is non-meristematic plant tissue, basically. Formation of adventitious organs will happen under this process. Production of roots and shoots or even leaves will happen. Then these organs may arise out of pre-existing meristems or out of differentiated cells. Either of this could happen in organogenesis. Then this may involve callus intermediate, but often occurs without callus also. So this is organogenesis. Then you have direct organogenesis. In this, if you look, direct organogenesis. Direct organogenesis is where like direct shoot or root formation from the explant, directly from the explant without any callus intermedia. Another way is like somatic embryogenesis. Somatic embryo, there are two routes for somatic embryogenesis. One is direct embryogenesis. The other one is indirect embryogenesis. Direct embryogenesis is basically embryos initiated directly from the explant. You have the explant, right on the explants, embryos are formed. That is direct embryogenesis. Here there will not be any callus phase. The other one is indirect embryogenesis, where callus from the explant takes place, and then which eventually embryos are developed, which eventually converts into embryos, or embryos are developed from the callus. So these are the two ways in which the somatic embryos would form. It's also like you have like adventitious embryos, parthenogenetic embryos or apomixis. You also have androgenic embryos, right? So then the somatic embryogenesis as a means of propagation is not really much looked out, because high probability of mutation. That is because if it is especially from the callus phase, generally will have mutations accumulated in the callus. Why mutations accumulate in the callus? Because every time a cell divides, 10⁻⁻⁶, at that proportion, the spontaneous mutation per gene is bound to happen. So if you consider n number of genes into 10⁻⁶ would be the value, which is definitely towards a bigger value, the higher probability of mutation. So when number of cell divisions become more and more, then more and more mutations will definitely accumulate into the cells, into the callus. When such a callus gives rise to plants through somatic embryogenesis, the mutations are expected, which is not desired from the micropropagation point of view or from propagation point of view. The method is usually really difficult, because one need to achieve these conditions in vitro and then scale them up. All of that has to be done. Then losing regenerative capacity becomes greater with repeated subcultures. That's another problem. Induction of embryogenesis is very difficult with many plant species. That's which is part of it. Then a deep dormancy often occurs with the somatic embryos. Once you have developed the embryos, there's a dormancy seen in multiple cases. Then the applications, if you look at the applications of this, the production of large-scale planting material is done like this. Is one important application of it, which you call micropropagation. Then another important application is to produce clean planting material from the stock. These in vitro cultures, different types of in vitro cultures, we can use them for micropropagation, production of large-scale planting material, and then to produce clean plant material from the stock which is infected with pathogens, viruses, and other pathogens. The commercial production of plants used for like potting, landscape, florist, for all that floriculture purposes, very nicely this particular technique can be used, and in fact is being used. Other applications, if you try to see, large-scale growth of plant cells in liquid media, that is in bioreactors, for the production of plant-derived secondary metabolites and recombinant proteins is another very important application in the biopharmaceutical industry of the plant tissue culture. And then to conserve rare and endangered plant species is another application. To screen cells rather than plants in vitro, that is in vitro screening for many characters like herbicide resistance or tolerance, or for the heat resistance, heat tolerance, or trying to select cell lines and plants which are resistant to specific toxins produced by pathogens. So that way one can try to identify resistant plants or tolerant plants to various biotic and abiotic stresses through screening cells in the plant. So this becomes advantageous that way. Also, to cross distantly related species and recover plants from them is another very important application of plant tissue culture. Then production of identical sterile hybrid species can be obtained using this method. Among them, if you look at the types of vegetative propagation, there are different types of vegetative propagation, natural vegetative propagation. But we try to also in the horticulture industry, you try to do cuttings and then make them to root, or do grafting, or also like layering, or maybe sometimes micrografting, micropropagation. All these are all like our interventions, like, we try to intervene. Among all these different types of interventions, micropropagation in fact has considerable application. One of the biggest applications of tissue culture today is micropropagation. What is this micropropagation basically? Micropropagation is like basically meristem tip culture. You have the meristem like this. We looked at this meristem let Lego. You take out that meristem, put it onto the media, and manipulate the hormones, give all conditions that are required. It will develop shoot and root. And recall back how hormonal manipulation can lead to formation of multiple shoots. So that is done, which gives multiple plants from a single plant. So if you look at these stages of micropropagation, in micropropagation there are 4 stages or 5 stages to say. First one is called stage 0, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. Stage 1 is selection and preparation of mother plant to be used for the micropropagation. So basically a sterilization of plant tissue takes place in this, or you try to take the tissue which is already grown in the sterile conditions. Then in the stage 1, that is stage 0, and then in the stage 1, initiation of the culture will take place, where explants are placed on the growth media in the required numbers, and then the required conditions are given. In stage 2, multiplication of that material will happen, where explant transferred to shoot media, and then multiple rounds of culturing is done in order to increase the number. Stage 3, all those plants that have been multiplied now in vitro are transferred to rooting media, another media in vitro with specific hormonal composition, where you get the rooting for individual plants. And then stage 4 is called transfer to soil, where explants are returned to soil, they are hardened off, and then they are later used for the actual applications in the field. So there are 5 stages: stage 0, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 in the micropropagation typically. If you try to look at the systems used for the generation of the plants by micropropagation, these are the systems or methods of micropropagation. One is auxiliary branching, where more than 90%, 95% of the micropropagation is done this way. Why? Because it is genetically stable and then simple and straightforward method. Here you take the auxiliary buds, just like this, these regions, and then try to do the process. Then the second one is called adventitious shoot formation, where you take basically this kind of tissue, and then put it onto the media, and from the tissue, the shoots will form directly. This is efficient but prone to genetic instability because the tissue, this particular tissue, has formed with repeated cell division from embryo. During that time, as we mentioned, as we already discussed, every time cell divides, 10⁻⁻⁶ is the rate of mutation for one gene. So that way, when cell divides multiple times, it would have accumulated mutations. So the cells in this region would have accumulated mutations. So now that you are like inducing it to form a plant, so likely that there would be some variation out there. Then the third method is somatic embryogenesis, as we saw and discussed already. Let's look at this axillary shoot proliferation. Growth of axillary buds stimulated by the cytokinin treatment. Shoot arise mostly from the pre-existing meristem. We need to remember this. There is already a pre-existing meristem. We are stimulating existing meristem to produce many more such meristems and then grow up. So clonal in vitro propagation by repeated enhancing the formation of auxiliary shoots from the lateral meristems is a possibility, and shoot produced are rooted first in vitro and then they are later taken to the ex vitro conditions. This is quite reliable in some plant species. Then if you look at this meristem tip culture, we look at it already. So results in plantlets free from virus and fungi and bacteria, because it's very actively dividing cell, actively dividing dome, much faster than bacteria or virus would multiply. So, but only thing is you need to take that portion and then initiate your subsequent cultures, that actively growing portion, and initiate your subsequent cultures. In many plants it is used, like many banana, potato, sweet potato, orchids, in many plants. This kind of method is used. Adventitious shoot formation, if you look at, initiated directly in the explant, as we saw already, and of course adventitious shoots also can come from the callus, results in high rate of multiplication. That results in the, generally, as we already saw, results in the aberrated plants with some mutations due to the inherent reasons that we discussed. All these plants are used, like bulbs are used, especially bulbs are used in case of lily, Easter lily, immature inflorescences are used, cotyledon, all these are used. If you look at this knotted one, when this kind of adventitious shoots are being formed from the callus or directly from the organ, when knotted one was stained, okay, in situ hybridized, you can see the expression of the knotted one gene. The dots you see is the expression of knotted one because it's a marker gene. Knotted one is directly involved in the formation of the shoots, as we saw already previously. But even here you could see there's a lot of data of this nature available. Okay. Callus and protoplast culture systems. There are many callus cell and protoplast culture systems can be subcultured and maintained indefinite period of time. Callus can be subcultured any number of times and maintained, but only thing is one has to be careful of mutations. Almost all plant parts can be used. Both auxins and cytokinins must be there in the media when you are growing the callus. But rarely even basal media sustains, depending on the endogenous levels and plant species that we're talking. And then such a callus can be used for organogenesis or maybe meristanoid formation. This was first done in carrot and tobacco and subsequently in many species. Then these callus suspension cultures are really used in many ways. That it produces a friable callus basically because of continuous agitation. And this mass of callus can be really used to induce secondary metabolites of our interest. But only thing is we should know how to induce them. What is the triggerer? And once induced, then we should have a mechanism to harness that. So many bioreactor systems have been designed, continuous flow and otherwise, where you can grow the callus in large quantities continuously and then produce the secondary metabolites that way. Even protoplasts also can be cultured and grown like that. Then the somatic embryogenesis and synthetic seeds, as we discussed already, from the callus, it's hardly used, but it's a possibility. One can do that. Somatic embryogenesis, beautiful papers are there. In fact, to see early 1980s and early 90s, there are a lot of effort that went into this synthetic seeds development. You can see here, in case of Sitka spores, the synthetic seeds. This is a typical bioreactor where you have a situation where you need to take care of the media, then agitation, then sensors to monitor all factors, and once you, and then of course you have to have the media coming in, and then the media effluent going out. Very sophisticated, much automated and monitored remotely. All sorts of advancements have happened in this particular endeavor bioreactors. A few important factors that are important in tissue culture are like temperature, light, photoperiod. All those factors that are really required for a plant to grow, plus to maintain hygiene in vitro. All those have to be taken care. They are basically like light. If you think of light, quality of the light, then the duration of the light, then the temperature, sugar and carbon source, internal pathogens. Many a times pathogens will be there in the explant. They may not appear for some time. And once you subsequently subculture, after 4 or 5 subcultures, when your culture is really built up, then all of a sudden a bacteria might come up. Those are all one has to take care, because that's going to spoil the whole thing. The release of phenols is yet another problem. Tissue proliferation, habituation, variation in the micropropagated plants. These are a few concerns that one has to have, but the factors have to be provided with. See here, when proper cytokinin is not given, this is how the plant would look. So this is how when cytokinin is given properly, when suboptimal cytokinin will lead to this type of growth. Similarly, say same here in another plant. This is how the phenols come up. Okay, these are all the concerns. There are many advantages of this micropropagation, like many propagules rapidly one can produce, need not have to worry about the season, and then other factors generally see in the nurseries, because it is done in the controlled conditions. Continuous propagation around the year, potential for the disease-free propagules, which is one great application of this. At least to start with, your planting material is free of diseases. So that's very important. No seed-borne or plant-borne pathogens would be there when you take the micropropagation material. Then definitely inexpensive per plant once laboratory is established. That's how we have hundreds and thousands of laboratories all over country for different plant species. Precise crop production schedules can be had. all of us know almost like, we have schedules. You can have a schedule and then you can have a, you can achieve that. Like in case of Rose, it is done. Reduce the stock, plant space, and all of that, many advantages. The disadvantages, if you look at specialized equipment facility, not really very high end, but is required, definitely. Then more technical expertise is required. Relatively technical expertise is required, not that straight away untrained farmer can do it. Definitely you need someone who goes through a specific training. Then protocols not optimized for all species. That's another concern. One need to really optimize, have your own protocols with you, or buy the protocols, take the protocols from some others, and then optimize to your bench and then see that you utilize it. Plant produced may not fit industry standard. This really happens when you don't know whether to use all those intricate things that we saw until now, where those genetic mutations come up, where the mutations come up, and how many cycles you can take, what is the starting material, what is the type of in vitro culture that you really need to adopt. All of this, if you don't know, then definitely the planting material will not be of industrial standard. And once the plants really grow in the field, you see a lot of variations. Many a times we end up in visiting farmers' fields to address these issues, and most of the times it would have been genetic instability. So those are important concerns we need to really look at. Relatively expensive to set up the laboratory, but Government of India really helped a lot. In fact, DBT funded a large number of projects in early, especially 90s. DBT, in fact, maintains a domain where all this information is available. A large number of industries are there, which are really successfully doing and serving the farmers. A few things that to see what is that this tissue culture is really has done. It has enhanced quality deliverability has happened through this. How? It reduces the disease transmission in planting material. For sure, reduces the disease transmission in planting material, which otherwise is really not true in a conventional manner. Because you take the seed, there would be seed-borne diseases, planting material-borne diseases would be there. But if you are taking the material from the right tissue culture laboratory, initially diseases are not there. Then produce plants from the seeds which are low chances of germination, like in orchid. That's another deliverable from the enhanced quality deliverable from the tissue culture that we all have realized. Then to establish clean stock from the viral and other infections. Whatever the material that you have, you can establish a clean stock from that. Then they produce clones and desired genotypes, which is possible, which has been achieved. Then the production of planting material in absence of seeds and necessary pollinators and all of that, one can achieve this. Then regeneration of whole plant from the plant cells that have been genetically modified. Suppose you have you have transferred a gene into few cells initially in the callus, then you can regenerate the plant from that. So that's a quality deliverable that has happened through tissue culture, right? So with this, like in fruit crops, there are a large number of fruit crops, in fact, that have been micro-propagated, like bale, guava, mango, nona, jamun, many. I just put a couple of them here. Micro-propagated protocols are reported for all these many, especially horticulture crops, tree species, and then medicinally important, medicinal and aromatic plantation crops. For all these micro-propagation protocols have been there. In floriculture industry, this particular technique has been a boon because to some extent even variation is not much accounted, does not matter. And floriculture industry is one big user of this particular technology, right? Many protocols are there for many crops. Then in vegetable crops, seed production is where this technique is used, especially in case of potato, like disease-free potato. In fact, our university is going in a big way on this. Then medicinally, medicinal and aromatic crops. There are multiple species, micropropagation and cell suspension culture, both for primary and secondary metabolite production. There are a lot of reports in medicinal and aromatic crops. So this is what I had. I thought I shared these very basic things, maybe useful for students. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll try to take.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your very nice, clean, informative, and very depth presentation.
Thank you.
So now, with your permission, I would like to open this session for
Please.
question and answer.
Please,
So,
Dr. Bijit.
dear students, participants.